WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Beautiful day out there, huh?
Oh, it is gorgeous.
We live in one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Yeah.
Florida is named. Doesn't the name mean flowers or something like that?
I think so.
And so I want to talk about flowers. I don't know why you're spending so much money going to a therapist or to learn meditation. All you got to do is go out, be with the flowers, read some Shakespeare, right? Right? You'll calm down. You know, just don't worry about that bumblebee buzzing in your ear. Garrett Quayle is on the phone, and there's a book here I want you to know about. It's called Botanical Shakespeare, an illustrated compendium of all the flowers, fruits, herbs, trees, seeds, and grasses cited by the world's greatest playwright. There's a part of Central Park, right, called the Shakespeare Garden, and I think there's one at the Botanical Gardens in... oh gosh, what's the area called north of Gainesville, near the university?
Oh, Kanapaha Gardens.
Kanapaha. I think they've got this is kind of a cool idea people are doing. Garrett is a journalist, a Shakespeare expert, an actor who starred in the daytime drama Ryan's Hope. Really?
I loved Ryan's Hope.
Really?
I watched that all the time.
So she's a celebrity too. Good morning, Garrett. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Good morning. Thank you so much. What an introduction.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Well, we don't need to pay all that money to shrinks, right? We just got to go out, enjoy the gardens, right? I mean, it's very
enjoy the gardens and read Shakespeare. There's a lot of therapy in Shakespeare. I was actually thinking of starting a podcast on Shakespeare therapy.
And I'm not really trying to be just plain silly. I was really, as I was looking at your book, Robin gave me the e-version of the book, and I'm looking at it thinking, this is calming me down. Whatever was happening before I started looking at it. Yeah, I know. And the illustrations are really works of art. I mean, I know they're replicating God's works of art, but they're they're beautiful. It's a wonderful book.
Yeah, that's what really, the project was brought to me by the artist, Sumie Hasegawa, and it was what made me want to do it, because usually Shakespeare's plants are depicted in the old woodcuts, and you can't recognize them in the wild, you know, because they are so thick and heavy and all that. So when I saw her fern, and then I saw the fern in the ground, I was like, oh my God, there it is.
See, now, so there's another part of this, too, that intrigues me. And I think sometimes we just want to relax. That's the part that intrigues you. But there's another part. It's the thing that stimulates, whatever stimulates our curiosity about the world or about history, you know? Because I could be sitting in that garden I just referred to, whether it's here in Florida or the one in Central Park, and I could say, well, I didn't know that. And then there it is, right there. There's the plant, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I really wanted to marry Shakespeare, which people think is, you know, old and in the past, with the present day and growing it in the immediate. And so when you see a flower, or you see a fern, or you see a tree, you can attach it to a character. You can attach it to literature and history and poetry, and there's all these things going on at the same time.
And you couldn't have chosen a better person than Helen Mirren to write the foreword. I mean, gosh, even though she's a spy and shoots guns in the movie Red, she always has her flowers in the background with everything.
Isn't that incredible? Yeah, that was just luck, but luck being that definition of opportunity and preparedness and all that stuff, because I had seen her in a play on Broadway called The Audience, which she was amazing in, and then right after that read an article that she loves gardening, and I already knew she loved Shakespeare, so it just seemed like a natural fit.
The book, for those, I don't know if I mentioned the name, Botanical Shakespeare. So do you have, how long is the book been? You're getting really good reviews. I'll start with that on Amazon. But are you getting feedback from people who are, maybe they're more into plants than they are Shakespeare, and now they're being introduced to Shakespeare because of this? Yes,
and that's been, certainly was a aim of mine because gardening is the #1 hobby in America. And I had to laugh when you said Florida is flowers because I'm from Florida, and I tucked a little factoid about Florida in there, and I think people always say that there was a guy called Jacques Lemoyne de la Morgue, which is a great name, and he traveled to Florida in 1564, but he also did a watercolor book for, there's only 3 in the world, and he did all these flowers, animals, and birds, and put 4 names to them: Latin, German, French, and English, and he gave it to a poet in England, Mary Sidney Herbert. And it was one of the things that I used as a resource to check colors, to check shapes, to check all that stuff. And it just fascinated me that he went to Florida in 1564.
Is that right? Now, when you started the project, were you aware that there would be such a wealth of information so that you could actually have a whole book about this subject?
I wasn't. And Sumie really came up with the idea because she had been an artist in Japan, and then she had given it up when she came to America, and then she married a performer who was doing kind of like a pub crawl of Shakespeare scenes through parks, like you were saying with the Central Park Garden, Shakespeare Garden. And she started hearing daisies pied and violets blue and lady smocks all silver white. And she thought, well, maybe I'll just paint 1 or 2. And then it grew into an obsession.
Oh, that's kind of a fascinating story, isn't it? So where are you right now? Where are you calling from?
New York.
Oh, in the city? Are you in Manhattan?
I am.
So
not far from the Shakespeare Garden.
So I've never been there, but I understand it's not just about the flowers. They've got a whole. Isn't there like a miniature stage for plays?
Yes, at the Delacorte, which is kind of a little castle, and that's in the background of the stage, and they do all kinds of Shakespeare plays free in the summertime.
That's the same name as the don't tell me, the clock in the zoo, isn't it? The Delacorte?
Yep, exactly. The donors did that.
What is the story behind that? Is that a guy's name?
I don't. It was one of the big donors to Central Park, I think. I have to check that down. But I have gone to the Shakespeare Garden a couple times, and I'd love to redo it because it's there's not a lot of Shakespeare plants in there now.
Oh, really?
And I think it needs to be redone. Yeah. So I'm very interested in this one by Gainesville because my father lives not too far from there.
Is that right? Yeah.
Oh, you'll love it. Kanapaha Gardens.
It
is outstanding.
Yeah, I don't know much about plants, but it's just fun to be there. I mean, they're a bamboo plant. You feel like you're in. I don't know what you feel like you're in, but you're in a hallway of bamboo. It's just it's all around you. Yeah, it's just amazing how people do this. So, do you have a garden of your own?
Well, I live in New York City, so Central Park is my garden.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not. But it's gotten me into growing things and realizing how similar learning Shakespeare is to planting a seed and growing it, because as you mentioned, it does sharpen the mind. I think it's certainly more fun than Sudoku puzzles and things like that.
Right, I'm with you. It's like an academic stimulant or something. It just stimulates your curiosity, and then somehow the only problem is you're going to have to find somebody who's interested, because if this comes up at Thanksgiving dinner or at Valentine's, if the other person doesn't have a clue, then you got a lot of information you can't really share.
But that's one of the best parts about the book. I mean, you have it with the different fruits and vegetables, and if you're there at a Thanksgiving dinner or something, you can delve into the history of that particular item, like the apple, and then also start quoting some of the Shakespeare verses in reference to the apple.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a tendency to make dishes that are centered around the plants and the vegetables in the book, because it's fun. And we're starting to look at making ice creams and things out of the more obscure vegetables like coloquintita and quince and medlar. So that's been a fun project.
So is there a Shakespeare Garden where Shakespeare lived?
Well, they're researching that in New Place, but it's kind of they're not really sure, and there's been a lot of research, and they're trying to recreate what they think was there, but there wasn't really a lot of information. And there's been a lot of lore that has grown up, excuse the pun, over the many hundreds of years. So it's sort of sifting through what's really true. And I was really assiduous about that in the book. But I think I would love to do a new kind of Shakespeare garden, because they do all these formal Elizabethan gardens, but I think most of the plants are wildflowers and wild vegetables and all that kind of stuff. And I think it would be fun to do a really wild garden.
So what is his connection, Shakespeare's connection with plants? I mean, was he a botanical kind of a guy, or did he just see a lot of poetic uses? If you had asked me before this conversation, and even after this, I'm going to have a hard time, but the only one I could think of is a rose, right? A rose is still a rose by any other name or something like that, right? That's
exactly.
That's the only one I could think of.
Well, there's so many. I know a bank where the wild thyme blows. You can say that before you make your salad, or rub your turkey. You were talking about Thanksgiving with sage and thyme stuffing. I mean, there's I don't know, 20 vegetables. There's more than 30 trees. He was just very observant, I think, and aware of the natural surroundings. But of course, a lot of the plants are metaphors, and a lot of them are jokes. The vegetables tend to be a lot of sex jokes, actually.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that eventually. Yeah, and some I think are still used in street slang, like root. I think that's kind of become street slang, right?
Yes,
that's exactly right.
You do have a section in here about the user's guide, how to use the book, and I think that's pretty insightful for you to do that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted people to know that it's not just something that lays there on the coffee table. You can dip into it. You can get, some solace. You can learn one line. I used to belong to this place called the Shakespeare Workout, which was like a gym for your brain. And you had to learn 4 to 14 lines, memorize 4 to 14 lines every week. And I have a friend who's 87 who has kept his brain so incredibly sharp by doing that.
You also you use the word currants, and I think that's pretty amazing because you compare them to the gooseberries.
Mm-hmm. Well, gooseberry is a very sexual plant.
Really?
Because goose was also the name of a prostitute, and there was a brothel right near the Bishop of Winchester's palace, which was also right near the Globe, and they called the brothel denizens the Winchester geese. So you have to sift through. It took a lot of going through this thing and figuring out when goose meant gooseberry, when goose meant prostitute, and when it meant both.
Oh my gosh! This is what makes this subject so interesting. You might not have known it, right? Do we sometimes misinterpret what he meant? It sounds like I would. I'm just guessing.
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's. I don't want to get too off color on a radio show, but yeah, there's a lot of things that have been misinterpreted. Okay, for instance, the Victorians, when they came in and did a lot of work on Shakespeare, they took a lot of the sex out because it just wasn't their thing, shall we say.
They ruined it by doing that.
Well, what happened was when I started researching the fig, I mean, I got a lesson. There was a lot of stuff I didn't know.
That was very funny too.
Tell me
that
about
part about the fig was very funny.
Can we talk about that? Yeah, it's okay. We're fine. All the kids are in school.
Well, for one thing, there's a gesture. There's a gesture that Pistol does that is the fig, and it's sort of, I describe it as the female version of shooting a bird. And I did a talk up in Buffalo, New York, and there was a Russian woman there, and she said, "Oh, we use that all the time." So I think it's just it didn't come to America somehow.
Yeah. Well, we've been kind of puritanical, I think, in our history.
And you point out that it's not just the flowery beauty, the beauty of the flower itself, but also there are medicinal benefits too from some things, like sea holly.
That's right. Well, this was their medicine cabinet, you know. All their tinctures and all their herbal remedies and all that stuff came from their kitchen gardens, and came from plantain is one that's used a lot, and everybody thinks, oh, it's bananas, but there are no bananas in Shakespeare. A plantain is this weed, really. I see it now that I know what it looks like. I see it all over the place, and people just trod across it. They trample it, but the leaves were used to put on your wounds because it had an antiseptic property.
Oh, really?
So, you know, yeah, you could go out to the park and pick a plantain if you've got a cut, if you fell down, and use that and help. I had a funny situation. I was at a conference in Ireland, and I saw the fern in the ground, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the fern, I think I said. And then I had this incredible stinging pain, and I thought, oh, okay, that's stinging nettles, and it really hurts, but I'm experiencing the book, so that's okay.
Oh, that's kind of funny.
And I looked on the internet, and it takes 24 hours for the pain to go away, and I have to say that is true almost to the minute. But I learned writing the book that dock leaves grow right next to nettle in the fields, and if you crush up a dock leaf and rub it on the nettle, it soothes the sting right away. And I just thought how amazing it was that the pain and the cure are right next to each other.
Oh my gosh! And is that expressed in something Shakespeare wrote, or is that just an anecdote?
No, no. Well, that's when I learned the research of the book. But no, both nettles are about. Richard II uses it to curse his enemies. You know, he wishes stinging nettles on them and stuff. But no, it doesn't have the remedy in the quote.
Oh, you talk about
we have it.
Well, you talk about the poison that killed Hamlet's father, and that there's still a controversy.
Well, as you will discover when you dig a little deeper with Shakespeare, everybody argues about everything. But yeah, so he calls it Habona, and so there's been many, many, many things written over the hundreds of years about what he means by Habona. So I go through every single possible poison and let the reader decide, although I admit I'm leaning heavily towards a particular answer.
How do you spell Habona? What is that? Hebona.
Some people thought it was henbane, which is a poison, which is also called insane root, and that's mentioned in the Scottish play. Mm-hmm. So.
The book is getting good reviews, as I mentioned. I found it on Amazon. Do you have a website that you've created for the book?
We sure do. And we try to put new stuff up on there about different plants all the time. And we have a little instruction video on how to make these little roses that I give out at talks with the rose quotes attached to them as leaves. And I just have people get up and speak the speech a little bit so that they, can have a little fun with it, not so intimidated by it, realize that they know a lot more than they think they know.
Give us a sneak peek, if you could. Maybe you could tell us of the plant that's illustrated, or the flower, and then read whatever quote accompanies it.
Well, I'll just do what I suggest other people do, is just randomly open something. Here we go. Okay. Oh, this is what I was talking about before.
Okay.
I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where oxlips and the nodding violet grows. So you might not know what an oxlip is, but then you can look at the picture and go, oh, it's like a primrose. It's in the primrose family.
Oh, okay.
And oxlips and cowslips are named as such because they grew in meadows and paddocks where the sheep and the oxen and the cows were grazing.
Is Queen Elizabeth's garden does it have the flowers and things as the former Queen Elizabeth? Does she keep all that up?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm doing an article on that right now because I'm saying that the whole beginning of garden competition, I did the Chelsea Flower Show in London last year, and the whole beginning of garden competition started with Queen Elizabeth I because everybody was trying to impress her, and so they upped their garden game, and they were constantly having the better garden. Oh, I have the better garden, to get her to come and stay longer, which meant you had more influence on her political and policy decisions. And so that's where the whole craze of gardening took root, if you'll excuse the pun. And so, and now Queen Elizabeth and Buckingham Palace Gardens, they have some of the mulberry trees that King James planted, actually, because he wanted to start the silk trade and make all this money from silk, because mulberry worms, they eat the mulberry leaves. However, he planted the wrong mulberry trees, because they only eat white mulberry leaves. They don't eat black mulberry leaves.
Oh,
and so it was a big... Yes, it was an investment gone horribly wrong.
For those locally who go to the Epcot, the garden thing, in 2019, the year that just started, obviously, the Flower and Garden Festival at Epcot this year mentions the Shakespeare Garden. So they're doing, I don't know if they've done it before, but it came up when I was looking for your book as a recommended.
Oh, wow.
You know how the computer tells you what you should do? So apparently there's going to be one down there. So this has become a theme, or not a fad, is that a good word? I mean, it's trending, right? I mean, it seems like...
Well, gosh, I hope so. I didn't know about that, so I'm going to have to contact them. Thank you. I hope so, because I think getting all these things connected, our history and our literature and poetry and the growing world around us, I think it's good to reconnect, certainly, with the natural world. And there's such a push towards locavore eating and organics and, growing your own food. And I think all of these things are connected.
And when a person like me, I'm not familiar with all of Shakespeare's works, just the ones that just seemed popular, which is only, a few of them in my growing up. But this is really intriguing to me, since you've gotten all of this historical value in your book. I really want to dig into the rest.
Oh, I'm so pleased to hear that. Yeah, I think Shakespeare can offer, I guess, solace and succor when because it's lasted for 400 years. It's just layered and layered with not only plants but wisdom and the writers of the ages, the Greek philosophers and Roman and all this kind of stuff was brought into this English language to really. They had a tenet back then called learning through delight. And I think we've lost that a little bit, that, learning and going to school is this thing, and then having fun is this thing on the other side. And they really should go together, and it should be fun to learn new things.
This is so amazingly, I don't know, coincidental or timely. I'm looking at now some of the things that they're planning, and I guess they did this in 2018 also. They had a bust statue, Robin, we call that, the sculpture of Shakespeare's head.
A bust.
And they've got little, like, the quotes in the garden in Epcot that go with whatever flower it's being placed near. I was trying to read one of them.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it's real tiny. I can't read it, but if you Google it, you'll see they're all over the place. See? So you get the book and go down to Epcot, and you could match things up, and then you wouldn't have a headache. you wouldn't have a headache anymore, right?
Right, and see if they made any mistakes. There's a few. One of the other reasons that we did the book is because there was some mistakes as far as certain flowers and misidentifying them.
Oh, really?
And also certain quotes. And people say, oh, there's mint in this play, but they didn't look closely enough. And sometimes a mint is a place that you forge coins,
Yeah.
So there's that kind of let's say, not attention to detail.
What an honor to have you on our show, Garrett. And we didn't even talk about Ryan's Hope one time. So
I love that. I remember you.
Thank you for being on the show with us.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Good luck with the book, and if you're in the area, come into the studio. We'd love to have you.
Oh, thank you. Well, and thank you for the tip about Epcot. Maybe I will.
Oh my gosh.
And go see a play. That's the most fun thing to do, is just go see a play.
Yes, and I think Robin said there's one in Brooklyn and the Bronx also, and 2 other Shakespeare gardens.
The Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. Yeah.
They have one, absolutely.
Garrett, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, we'll take a break. Be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala.
Fox News, I'm Chris Foster. Before leaving on a trip to the border in